In our lives, we all feel like we have missed our chances or messed up an important opportunity. We can even be tempted to believe that our best days are behind us. God wants you to know that it's never too late to begin again and have a great life. He is on your side, and if need be, He can even put a road in the wilderness, rivers in the desert. God is a way maker. Right now, you might be discouraged or depressed, thinking that you have lost all your opportunities, especially in studying your lessons. But God says today that it is never too late. You can get back and you can start everything now. If God is by your side, He can do great and mighty things. You need to surrender to the Lord and put in all your heart and soul in making up what all you have lost during this lockdown. God is a way maker. You just need to trust and keep moving. God bless you, children. Environmental economics. I'm going to start with a new chapter, 10th chapter. Hope you like this slide. It gives a lot about our environment. So when God created this world, everything was good. It was greenery everywhere. But now man has created a lot of damage to the environment. So I have a significance in preparing this slideshow with a black background. Initially it was greenery everywhere, but man over the ages has destroyed the environment. So this PowerPoint has been given a black background. Environmental problems are really social problems. They begin with the people as the cause and with the people as victims. So who is the cause for all the environmental problems? Man. Or we are the cause for all the environmental problems. And ultimately, who suffers because of all these problems? It is we. So the cause begins from the people and it ends with the people as victims. So this was given by Sir Edmund Hillary. Environmental economics is the study of interactions between human economic activity and the natural environment. So the link between the economy and the environment are manifold. You might be wondering why we have to study about environmental economics. Why should environment find a place in economics? It is because there is a great link between economy and environment. The environment provides resources to the economy and also acts as a sink for emissions and waste. So environment only gives us all the raw materials, and it also acts as a sink to absorb the emission and waste. So poor environmental quality in turn affects the economic well-being by lowering the quality and quantity of resources. The natural resources are renewable or non-renewable. Renewable means it can be revived, like the trees. but certain resources cannot be renewed. That's why man has been using more and more of these resources, thus depleting the environment. So, this lesson helps us to understand the link between economy and environment, and it also describes the various types of environmental pollution and their effects, and to understand the importance of sustainable development. So, environmental economics is a study of interactions between human economic activity and natural environment. So, environmental economics is a subset of economics that is concerned with the efficient allocation of environmental resources. Environmental economics takes into consideration issues such as conservation, how we have to conserve our natural resources, how to control pollution, how to manage our waste and recycling. So environmental economics deals with all these things. So what do you mean? Next, let us see the meaning of environment. The term environment has been derived from a French word environia, which means to surround. So environment is derived from the French word environia, which means to surround. Environment means all the conditions, circumstances, and influences surrounding and affecting the development of an organism or group of organisms. So, what do you mean by environment economics? It is a different branch of economics that recognizes the value of both the environment and the economic activity. What are the economic activities? Consumption, production, distribution, and exchange. So, this branch of economics deals with the environment and the economic activity. Again, environmental economics is an area of economics that studies the financial impact of environmental issues and policies. Next, what do you mean by ecosystem? An ecosystem includes all living things, plants, animals, organisms in a given area, interacting with each other and also with their non-living environments such as weather, earth, sun, soil, climate. So an ecosystem includes all living things as well as non-living things. Ecosystem is a geographic area where plants, animals and other organisms as well as weather and landscape work together to form a bubble of life. So ecosystems are the foundation of the biosphere and they determine the health of the entire system. So these are the ecosystem. The ecosystem of you. We have the resources, we are concerned with the wellness, the spaces, value, the mobility, the leisure, the community, the maker, the growth. All these forms the ecosystem. Next, let us see the linkage between economy and environment. Man's life is interconnected with various other living and non-living things. So the relationship between the economy and environment is generally explained in the form of material balance model developed by Alan Mees and R.V. Iris. Okay, so these two people have given the linkage or the relationship between an economy and the environment, which is called as the material balance model. This is based on the first law of thermodynamics. First law of thermodynamics, that is, the law of conservation of matter and energy emphasizes that in any production system, what goes in must come out. So the first law of thermodynamics in physics says that whatever goes in must come out. So based on this law, Nice and Iris have given the material balance approach. The material flow diagram implies that mass input must be equal to the mass output. So what does the diagram depict or imply? Whatever goes in must come out. So the mass input must be equal to mass output for every process. In short, material and energy are drawn from the environment. For any production process, we get the basic materials from the environment. So material and energy are drawn from environment, and it is used for production and consumption activities and returned back to the environment as waste. Raw materials are taken from the environment, it is used, and then it is given back as waste to the environment. So the functions of an economy are related to consumption, production, and distribution activities. So these are the basic economic activities. These activities have a direct relationship with nature. The consumption, the production, and distribution, they have a direct relation with nature. Nature provides the raw materials to the economy for its production and consumption activities. So only from the nature we get the raw materials. Residuals from both the production and the consumption processes usually remain, and they usually render disservices like killing the fish, reducing public health, and deteriorating buildings due to industrial pollution. So what does man do? He takes the raw materials from the environment and he gives it back to the environment in the form of waste, residues. Some waste, that is the residues from the production and consumption activities, are ultimately returned to the nature. Some waste can be recycled and it can be used again. So you get waste from the production sector and you also get waste from the consumption sector. So some waste can be recycled, but some cannot be recycled and it is given back to the rich. Further, energy that is taken out of the environment must reappear somewhere else in the economic system. So nature also, the environment also has the capacity to take in certain amount of waste, certain amount of emission. ஓரளவுக்கு நேச்சர் என்ன பண்ண முடியுமா, ஆண்டவர் இந்த உலகத்தை படைக்கும் போதே நேச்சருக்கு ஒரு கெப்பாசிட்டி கொடுத்துருக்காரு. பொல்யூஷனையோ வேஸ்டையோ அப்சர்வ் பண்ணுறதுக்கு ஒரு சர்டன் லெவலுக்கு தே கேன் அப்சர்வ். ஓகே, பட் ஒரு லெவலுக்கு மேலே போன பிறகு த நேச்சர் கேனாட் அப்சர்வ் ஆல் த வேஸ்ட் அண்ட் எமிஷன். ஸோ த லேண்ட் ஹாஸ் ரீச்ட் தட் saturation point in the 21st century. So just imagine a balloon, okay? If you want to fill a balloon with water, only to a certain extent it can be filled with water. When you were small, you would have played with water balloons, okay? We all take the balloons, keep it under the tap, and then fill in water. What happens? Only to a certain extent you can fill it. Otherwise, when it is filled, then more than it can hold, it will burst. A balloon also, you can blow in air only to a particular level. Beyond that, if you keep blowing air into the balloon will ultimately burst. Likewise, the earth can also absorb the pollutants, the emissions, the waste only to a certain level. Environment or nature has that capacity to absorb everything only to a certain level. Beyond that, nature or the environment cannot hold all these things and it will have an adverse effect. That's what is happening now. Earthquakes, tsunamis, because the nature is behaving in a opposite way. It cannot hold anything further on. All the waste it cannot hold. So it will have an adverse effect. So in short, material and energy are drawn from environment, used for production and consumption activities, and returned back to the environment as waste. So I would just like to explain this with a small flowchart. This is not there in your textbook, okay? இது உங்கள் புக்கில் இல்லாமல் நான் அடிஷ்னலாக உங்களுக்கு புரிய வைக்கிறதுக்காக இந்த ஃப்ளோ சார்ட்டை வச்சுருக்கேன். ஸோ த இன்டர்டிபெண்டன்ஸ் ஆஃப் எக்கனாமிக்ஸ் and environment is given below with a flow diagram. என்ன ஆகுது, நேச்சர்லேருந்து என்வாயன்மெண்ட்லேருந்து என்ன கிடைக்குது, நம்மளுக்கு ரா மெட்டீரியல்ஸ் கிடைக்குது. we get raw materials. ரா மெட்டீரியல்ஸ்லேருந்து நம்மளுக்கு என்ன கிடைக்குது, ரா மெட்டீரியல்ஸ் எடுத்து ப்ரொடக்ஷன் பண்ணுறோம். ஸோ ஃப்ரம் நேச்சர் we get the raw materials, and using the raw materials we produce. After produce we start consuming it. After consumption we have certain waste. Productionலையும் certain waste வரும், கன்சம்ஷன்லையும் certain waste வரும். இந்த வேஸ்ட்டை நம்ம என்ன பண்ணலாம், ஓரளவுக்கு என்ன பண்ணலாம், ரீசைக்கிள் பண்ணி திருப்பியும் ப்ரொடக்ஷன் ப்ராசஸ்க்கு யூஸ் பண்ணலாம். ஓகே, ஓரளவுக்கு ரீசைக்கிள் பண்ணி ப்ரொடக்ஷனுக்கு யூஸ் பண்ணலாம். பட் லேட்டர் ஆன் அல்டிமேட்லி ரீசைக்கிள் பண்ண முடியாததெல்லாம் எங்கே வருது, என்வாயன்மெண்ட்டுக்கு பேக் வருது. So in the production process you have certain waste. After the consumption process you have this certain waste. You dispose it. It goes back to the environment. Some can be recycled and it can be used. Others cannot be recycled. So ultimately everything goes to the environment. This diagram is given in your book. In its simple form, the material balance approach can be put in the form of equation. Before going into the equation, let me explain this flowchart which is given in the textbook. So what is there? Raw materials are drawn from the nature. From the environment, raw materials are drawn. Who uses the raw materials? The producers, they use the raw materials. Producers பண்ணி என்ன பண்ணுறாங்க, producers இதில் some has come out as residues. Some come out as residues. Residues from the production, அதான் RP, residues from the production. Producers goods produce பண்ணுறாங்க. Producers வந்து என்ன பண்ணுறாங்க, goods produce பண்ணும்போது கொஞ்சம் ரெசிடியூவாக ஆயிடுது. ஓகே, குட்ஸ் ப்ரொடியூஸ் பண்ணிவிட்டு கன்சியூமர் தே ஸ்டார்ட் யூஸிங் த குட்ஸ். கொஞ்சம் என்ன ஆகுது, ரெடியூஸ் ஆகுது, ரெசிடியூவாக வருது. எப்படி, ஒருவேளை நம்ம வந்து பென் யூஸ் பண்ணுறோம். ஆஃப்டர் வி யூஸ் த பென் வி த்ரோ இட். ஓகே, யூஸ் அண்ட் த்ரோ. Use and throw technique, we have been using it now, the Western culture. That is only creating lot of pollution. We eat something and we throw the plastic. We use the pen, we throw the plastic. We use mobile phones, we throw it back. So certain things ஒரு லெவலுக்கு யூஸ் பண்ணிட்டு திருப்பி நம்ம என்ன பண்ணிடுறோம், குப்பையாக தூக்கி எரிஞ்சிடுறோம். அதுதான் என்னது, ரெசிடியூஸ். ஸோ தீஸ் ஆர் ரெசிடியூஸ் ஃப்ரம் த கன்சியூமர். ரெசிடியூஸ் ஃப்ரம் த ப்ரொடியூசர் ஒரு சைடு வருது, ரெசிடியூஸ் ஃப்ரம் த கன்சியூமரும் வருது. ஒரு சில ரெசிடியூவை ரீசைக்கிள் பண்ணுறாங்க, ஒரு சில ரெசிடியூவை ரீசைக்கிள் பண்ணுறாங்க. சிமிலர்லி ஒரு சில ரெசிடியூ ஃப்ரம் த ப்ரொடியூசர் கேன் பி ரீசைக்கிள்டு. அதான் ரீசைக்கிள்டாக என்ன சொல்கிறோம், ஆர் ரீசைக்கிள்டு ஃப்ரம் த ப்ரொடியூசர். ஓகே, residue, the recycled residue from the producer, the recycled residue from the consumer. Again it is recycled and used by the producer. கொஞ்சம் என்ன ஆயிடுது, ரீசைக்கிள் பண்ண முடியாததை டிஸ்சார்ஜ் பண்ணிடுறோம். ரீசைக்கிள் பண்ண முடியாததை டிஸ்சார்ஜ் பண்ணுறோம். யார் டிஸ்சார்ஜ் பண்ணுறது, ப்ரொடியூசர். ஸோ ரீசைக்கிள்டு, ஓகே, it is not recycled. Residue discharged by the producer. Residue discharged by the producer. This is residue discharged by the consumer. Inga C vandirukano. Okay, there is a mistake in your diagram. It is C. Okay, so this must be C. I made a mistake here. This is consumer. Inga vandu C vandirukano. Idu producer. Purida? Discharge from the producer. This is when the discharge from the consumer. இது எங்க போகுது? Back to the environment. Are you able to understand this material balance approach, girls? See here, raw materials are drawn and producer uses the raw materials and some come out as residues. Some come out as residues and some come out as goods. Goods are used by the consumers. Some goods are used, some come out as residues. So these are residuals from the consumer, residuals from the producer. So the residual from the producers can be recycled. The residuals from the consumer can be recycled and it can be used by the producer again. Some of the residuals, okay, from the producer has to be discharged. Some of the residuals from the producer has to be recharged. Similarly, some of the residuals from the consumer has to be discharged. In the discharge ஆகிறது எங்க வருது? Comes back to the environment. This is about the material balance approach. So equation for this, material balance equal to goods are produced, then you have residual from the consumer, residual from the producer, okay, then some are given back to the producer. So residual from the producer which can be recycled, residual from the consumer which can be recycled. What goes to the environment? The discharge from the producer and the discharge from the consumer goes back to the environment. So environment is the supplier of all forms of resources like renewable and non-renewable, and it is also acting as a sink for cleaning up the waste. So environment only supplies all the resources and environment only acts as a sink. நம்ம பாத்திரம்லாம் கழுவுறோம், சிங்க்ல போட்டு அந்த ட்ரெயின்ல குப்பையெல்லாம் போற மாதிரி environment only gives us all the essential resources and also it acts as a sink. Households and firms are connected to the environment and they are interconnected too. So households or firms are connected to the environment and they are interconnected. Households and firms depend on nature for resources. Both households and firms send out residuals of consumption and production respectively to the nature. So this is about the material balance model. So the material balance model implies that mass input must be equal to the mass output for every process. Moreover, all resources extracted from the environment eventually become unwanted waste and pollutants. So production of output by firms from inputs resulting in discharge of solids, liquids and gaseous waste. So waste can be in the form of solids, liquids and gaseous state. Similarly, waste results from consumption activities by household also. So what do you imply from this material balance model? Disposal activities may affect both consumer and producers. So இதெல்லாம் dispose பண்றோமோ அது கன்சியூமரையும் அஃபெக்ட் பண்ணும், ப்ரொடியூசரையும் அஃபெக்ட் பண்ணும். ஓகே, அப்புறம் the environment has a large waste assimilation capacity, but this is not infinite. What do you mean by that? The environment has the power to observe பண்ண முடியும். வேஸ்ட் எல்லாம் ஒரு லெவலுக்கு தான் அப்சர்வ் பண்ண முடியும், அதுக்கப்புறம் அப்சர்வ் பண்ண முடியாது. So environment is the supplier of all forms of resources like renewable and non-renewable, and it is also acting as a sink for cleaning up of waste. Households and firms are connected to environment and they are interconnected too. Households and firms depend on nature for resources. Both households and firms send out residual of consumption, production respectively to the nature. And nature has the power to assimilate all forms of waste. So nature has the power to observe all forms of waste. But this power is conditional. There is a limit for everything. So this is very, very important. So in the assimilation power of the environment is limited. It is conditional. There is a limit for everything. The earth has reached the saturation point and it is unable to clean up several forms of waste. So remember, the earth can also non-cooperate. So ஒரு particular point on earth will not cooperate. And the saturation point earth has reached now. So as the future citizens, you all have to be very careful. I should also be very careful and you should also be very careful to protect our environment and preserve the natural resources for the generations to come. I will continue in the next video.